Excellent, thank you very much. Some of you will have seen some of these slides from the earlier sessions. I won't repeat them. We're doing well. We've grown our recycling rate from 7% to 56% in the last 20 years, but we've got to get that to 80% by 2030. Those of you who are at this morning's session, that's another 18 million tonnes of recycling we've got to grow. So in other words, we have to increase our current recycling rate by 50% in 9 years. Okay? Impossible task. You've got to do FOGO. Stop debating it. If you're in rural and regional Australia, it might be more expensive than your zero-cost landfills. The lesson there is you shouldn't have zero-cost landfills because there's no such thing in the world. It's costing your ratepayers in terms of long-term liability that you're building up by not funding your landfill properly. When you have a properly funded landfill and properly priced landfill, you will find that FOGO is cheaper than landfilling your organics. It's as simple as that. If you need a good consultant, there's probably 4 or 5 of us in the room who know how to do it. Right, 50% reduction in organics to landfill by 2030. You, state governments, local governments, federal governments signed up to it. Right, 50% reduction in organics to landfill. If you don't think your local government signed up to it, go and ask them why they didn't object when local government New South Wales signed up on your behalf. The fact is you are a signatory to the National Waste Program. Now you've got to ask your council, what are you doing about it? How are you going to get us there? The gap that we need to get to in 9 years, 18 million tonnes. The biggest organic streams that are currently going to landfill in the National Waste Report from households, paper and cardboard, 15.6%, food, 35%, organics, 13%. So if you're looking for the simplest solution to get your organics out of landfill, you're going to pick FOGO. FOGO captures 15 plus 35, 50%. Of what's currently in your garbage bin, on average in New South Wales, is going to landfill. Most councils don't have a FOGO bin. 20% of councils in Australia now have a FOGO bin. 80% do not. And by the way, this latest data, look at the little number down the bottom. That's a huge shift in the last 4 or 5 years. We're now saying 70% of the waste in a municipal garbage bin is organics. It used to be 55. Now, I think, I'm not actually sure why that is, whether that's a data error. Was Joe Picken in the room? Or whether we have in fact shifted because we've moved other materials out of the bin and that's the leftover group growing as a percentage of what's there. Joe is there, so someone ask him a question towards the end. The organics that's going to landfill, 7 million tonnes. It contributes to Australia's 3% of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. I mentioned that this morning. We've got to get that 55% out. That number is now 70% according to the National Waste Report. That 70% of what's in your current red bin or your garbage bin is organics. If I was inventing recycling in Australia now, I would not have started with the yellow top bin. Yellow top bins represent 17% of what you generate as a house. Organics represents 55 to 70% of what you generate as a house. So I would have said to all houses in Australia, you have a garbage bin, you have a FOGO bin. And if we ever get to recycling, well, that'll be a good thing. But the recyclables don't hurt the environment. They don't create climate change. They use a little bit more energy, but they're not a big greenhouse gas emitter. Yes, it's better to get the recyclables out. It's better to get the paper and cardboard, the plastic, the glass, the steel. But if you were looking at priority, the priority would have been the organics. Now we are where we are. We've got to accelerate the FOGO rollout. What do? Well, you simply add a FOGO bin, collect it weekly, and if you can, you push your garbage bin to a fortnightly service, and that delivers the best result. But my next couple of slides is saying it doesn't matter what FOGO you do, just do it. Whether you tweak with, as Viola just said, whether you have bin liners or you have compostable bags or you have push your fortnightly bin to your garbage bin to fortnightly or not, they're all tweaks. They don't matter that much. What matters is you provide your community a bin that they can then put their food and garden organics into. And the next couple of slides show that. There's multiple options out there. About 50% of households in Australia have a garden organics bin. We're very good at doing garden organics. We're missing the food. And what we say to councils is you can either do a one-step or a two-step dance. You You know, if you've got a two-bin system and you want to introduce a garden organics, go for it. That'll help. And then add food later. But you're communicating two different messages to your community at two different times. So in our view, you're better off doing a one-step dance, jump in, go FOGO, communicate it, educate it, get onto it. Now, whether you then move the garbage bin, and if you look closely, one of those says weekly, another one says weekly, fortnightly. And that's how we describe it. So you could have your garbage bin collected weekly and your FOGO bin weekly, or you can have your garbage bin collected fortnightly and your FOGO bin weekly. Right? So weekly, or weekly, fortnightly. It doesn't really matter. It matters a bit, but it doesn't matter a huge amount. And then you can do special things, for muds and add, but again, common message, you should be talking about FOGO, service to all households, and acknowledge that the multi-unit dwellings will generate mainly food. Who cares? Just call it FOGO, common message. You don't have to discriminate between a message to MUDs and a message to SUDs. It's just FOGO for the community. And people like Charlie and Soilco and Veolia, they'll just get a bit more food in that truckload. Okay, we'll blend it with a bit of extra green waste and away we go again. It's not a problem. Don't overcomplicate the messaging around FOGO. Sorry. And this is the point, that if you look down the bottom, in all that Spanish that's down the bottom there, it's different options for how you run the bins. Weekly, fortnightly, large bin, small bin, fortnightly, weekly. What you can see is they're all pretty good, right? It's the opt-in services that are the most expensive because you're not collecting many tonnes and you're running a big fat truck up and down any street. Opt-in services are expensive per tonne. But any uniform service across your community to everybody, hey, they're all pretty good, whether you have a weekly, or weekly, fortnightly, etc. So here's a couple of key messages. The contamination rate, I mentioned earlier, is 2.2% on average across Australia against 10% in curbside. People understand FOGO, right? Really good story. Weekly FOGO is better than a fortnightly FOGO service. There's no doubt about that. If you're doing FOGO, that green lidded bin gets picked up weekly. By the way, it's got all the fish and meat and prawn heads in it, so, you know, community like that. The only downside is if you push your garbage bin to fortnightly, you get the whole nappy fight. Only 3% of households have nappies. Just provide an additional service. Opt-in service for that additional nappy household. And of course, nappy households only last for 3 years and then they move around. So you've got to have an opt-in dedicated service for nappies. That's the only reason you can't push a garbage bin to a fortnightly service. If you do that, the collection side of FOGO is zero. There's no additional cost. So weekly FOGO, no-brainer. Fortnightly garbage service, pushing your garbage bin to a fortnightly service is slightly better. You get slightly higher FOGO capture rates in the order of 10 to 15%. A big or a small garbage bin makes almost no difference. So if you're a house, if your community's got small garbage bins, stick with small garbage bins. If your community's got 240 bins, stick with 240 bins. You don't gain much by pushing the 240 bin down to a smaller bin. You just annoy people. And, you know, we don't need that. As I said, any FOGO service delivers additional diversion, usually lifting you if you've already got yellow top bins, it'll lift your council to about the 60% number, bearing in mind the target is 80%. So FOGO's a great first start, but then you've got to do the other things. All right, where are we at to in terms of FOGO progress? 42 councils in New South Wales, 2 in Sydney, 38 councils in Sydney, so it's the hole in the donut. I'm hoping that the state government mandates FOGO. If you want to do energy from waste, you must have a FOGO bin. 5 in Metro Melbourne, 30 coming on stream by 2025, 12 in rural Victoria, mandated FOGO in Adelaide, mandated FOGO in Perth Peel region. 95 out of Australia's 580 councils, so we're at about the 18%, 16% now. You know, let's set a target for local government of 50% by 2025. Why not? It's a no-brainer. So there's our rollout. Lots in Vic, lots in WA. Now let's talk about capacity, the Veolia comment before. If you go and analyse the existing composters in Australia and say, have you got spare capacity, that's those numbers down the right-hand side. So there's about 3 million tonnes of existing additional capacity, which is just kind of hidden. It's their ability to upscale. Charlie, Veolia, ANL, they can upscale a bit on what they've already got. But the key point was the one I made this morning and just made again. It doesn't matter. They'll build the kit as you go out to tender, and they'll start the planning process. And if you're a council, why don't you identify the piece of land and get the planning process done early? That way you're now just tendering the operations. That's how you speed things up. The other comment, what about MUDs? How do we do MUDs? Lots of councils do MUDs. Right? I don't think FOGO in MUDs is a particularly significant problem, and FOGO has been done in MUDs all around the world. The answer is that the food that comes out will be a higher proportion than the green. Okay, so what? Doesn't matter, we just still compost it. The contamination rate, slightly higher, but not difficult, exactly the same issues. Veolia, Soil Co, they'll put in more refining, they'll put in slightly higher cost systems. That's not problematic as long as the levies are rising over here. It creates the headroom for there to do more and more refining of the compost to get a higher quality. The one thing I can comment about FOGO in tall multi-unit dwellings, I've only heard of one council that has a chute for FOGO. All the others are doing a bin on a floor or a bin in the basement. So I can pretty much, without qualifications, say chutes and FOGO don't go together because people have an aversion to the yogurt smeared down the inside of the chute. So if you want to talk about mud design, please feel free and come and talk to us. Another myth, there's not enough land to take the compost. I showed a slide this morning that you know, the little red dot in New South Wales. In New South Wales, it's 0.09% of available ag land would be required if every house had a FOGO bin. In Australia, it's a similar number. 0.1% of Australia's agricultural land would be required if we all had a FOGO bin. So don't let the chicken and egg story faze you when someone says, oh, there aren't enough farmers to take, there's not enough markets in our local area. That's just because no one's done the market development yet because they haven't had to. Veolia, Suez, Soilco, they all put salespeople on the moment they have a contract to do whatever it is you want them to do. Oh, and the little slide down there, this is our equivalent for Australia. Those of you who are not colourblind, you'll see a little red dot on Kangaroo Island. That's about the land area you need for all of Australia to take all the FOGO that we would generate. Right? It's nothing. But we should be doing it because right now we're landfilling that equivalent organics, creating 3% of Australia's methane. So there's plenty of markets. And farmers need quality compost. So one of the things you've got to watch is when you go to tender, don't just take the cheapest price, because the cheapest price is always the person who doesn't do the additional refining of the compost to get that quality standard up. Go for someone who's reputable. You can go and kick the tyres and say, are you achieving a saleable compost AS4454 with bugger all contamination in it? If you do that, choose them, no matter what the price is, because that's sustainable. Getting some dodgy operator who produces a 1% contamination compost is just going to burn the market out and the farmers will crack the shits. Excuse me for the real language. We can't sell shitty compost to farmers. That is the kiss of death to the FOGO sector. Contamination rates, there's some real numbers for you, showing that the average is 2% across the country as compared to recycling rate at 10%. So we get it, we the community get it. Any education you do is good education around FOGO. There's some really good stats coming out of WA and New South Wales that show the relationship between $1 spent on education reduces contamination by about 1%. So $1 per house per year in education reduces contamination in either yellow or the green bin by 1%. It's a great number. I didn't make it up. It just happens to be a fluke. So 1%, 1%, $1, 1%. Remember that. Look, at the end of the day, councils, in my view, shouldn't have a debate. It should be mandated by government. But if we're not going to mandate FOGO, we need to send price signals to mayors and councils so that decision becomes easy. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the waste manager to try and push the proverbial uphill within their council when the economics don't work and the mayor just says, it's more expensive. Don't come to me with that rubbish. It shouldn't come down to that, but that's where we are today in terms of public policy, and it's wrong, and it's silly. Plenty of other governments around the world have just said, no, mandate it, you must do it. There must be commercial FOGO, there must be household FOGO, and Europe just simply said you cannot put unprocessed organics to landfill. End of story, no debate. Imagine if the New South Wales or federal governments did that. No organics to landfill. It must be processed and reused. Done. There's 7 million tonnes, thousands of jobs. I think I did the maths once, 20,000 new jobs, if they just did that. And you're in good company. 20% of councils now have FOGO. Andrea, you're up there somewhere. So, everyone is doing it. You're on there somewhere. Keep going. Badger your neighbours. Utilise the infrastructure you've got. Put out contracts for FOGO. Don't be deterred. It's the way to go. If you wind the clock forward 20 years, we'll all be doing FOGO. My view is we just got to speed up. Thanks very much. Thanks, Jennifer.